Welcome to online version of Shelter House Shares. I'm Janine Ouderkirk, and I'm the Executive Director at Shelter House. And I have a couple staff members with me, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Audra Johnson. I'm the Sexual Assault Program Coordinator.
And I'm Nikita Murray, the Children's Services Coordinator.
Well, today we're here to talk about healthy relationships. So, tell me, why is it important to have this discussion today, all about teens and healthy relationships?
Well, it's incredibly important because we know that violence starts very young. The latest estimate says that 1 in 5 female high school students reported being physically or sexually assaulted by a dating partner.
1 in 5.
1 in 5.
The other part to that is that young people are starting their relationships much earlier, and they really have no idea about what a good relationship is, and they're basing it from what they see in the movies and with their friends and around them. So this is a really good conversation to have to get people started thinking about that.
About healthy relationships, not necessarily what's on TV.
Correct.
Okay. So what's the difference between a healthy relationship and an abusive one?
Going down to the very base of what it is that a healthy relationship is based in equality, and whereas an abusive relationship is all about power and control.
Okay. So talk about power control and how that might look in a teen relationship.
In a teen relationship, it's similar to relationships that, I guess, non-teenagers have, those that are a little bit older. But there's also a few things that are very, very teen-oriented, like peer pressure. That's something that you don't necessarily find in older relationships. But power and control, it can take various different behaviors or different outlooks. Threats, intimidation, manipulation, pretty much any behavior that can be used to try to exert power and control over the other person.
Okay, so the difference between that and bullying might be because it's the boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship.
Correct. Anyone that you're in a relationship with. And with teens, they tend to look at it more in terms of a long-term, maybe even a little more intimate relationship than they would with their casual peers or even their friends.
Okay. So what are some behaviors to look for in the early parts of the relationship?
Well, we always recommend looking for what we call red flags. And red flags are these little warning signs that say, hold on, take a moment, look at this relationship to see if it's healthy and to see if it's something that you really want. They don't necessarily say that 100% that your relationship is abusive, but they're just little things to look out for at the very beginning. And there's so many of them. Isolating you from your friends and family, checking your cell phone or email without your permission, telling you what to do. Any sort of physical violence, even if it's meant in a joking manner, is definitely a big red flag.
And what we usually do when we go out is kind of put it in terms that young people can understand. So those things that they may think are flattering parts of a relationship, we kind of help them to understand what's flattery and what's harmful. So in other words, we'll say something like, if your guy or your girl is blowing up your cell phone with text messages wondering where you are or what you're doing or when you'll be home, those are all red flags. Or if they start to tell you, I just love you so much, or I'm just into you so much, you spend too much time with your friends, or you spend too much time doing activities that you normally enjoy, and it comes down to having to choose between those things that you enjoy or that person that you're in a relationship with, then that also is an unhealthy, that's a caution sign that the relationship could be unhealthy.
I have had the pleasure of knowing a lot of young women in my years, and a lot of them think that jealousy, he loves me so much, that jealousy's cool. Could that be a red flag?
That's a huge one, especially when it involves male friends, because typically with teens, they have friendship groups that involve both genders, but sometimes there will be a partner who will come into the relationship, whether it's a male or a female, and they will, again, force the young person to choose between that relationship with a friend of the opposite gender and the relationship that they're in, the boyfriend-girlfriend relationship.
Okay, so those are things to look for in general, but what are some things to look for if you are an abuser? To find out, am I an abusive person? What are some of those things?
We think that this is an issue that is very important to talk about because, like Nikita said, if the only relationships that you know are what you see on TV or what you see in real life, and you have no examples of a healthy relationship, how on earth are you supposed to know? Which is why it's so important to talk about these warning signs that you may actually be an abuser. If you are using guilt trips to get the person you're dating to do something or not do something, that's a warning sign that you may be an abusive person. If you constantly call someone names, again, that's a pretty big warning sign. If you try to manipulate someone to do something, again, that's a warning sign and it's just not okay.
What if I do it really nice and say, oh, please, if you really loved me?
It doesn't matter. And usually when we're talking with young people and we present the list of red flags, we'll turn it around and say, okay, maybe it's easy to look at someone else and say, these are the behaviors of someone else. But then press them to answer the question, but how many of those things can you see in yourself? How many of those things have you done yourself? And then help them to understand that just like a person can be abused, a person can also be an abuser and not really even know it. And that's usually pretty eye-opening for them as well, to understand that they have some of those same characteristics.
So when you have those conversations and they decide, ooh, I've been doing that and I really don't want to be that type of person, what can they do?
Get some help. I mean, change is always incredibly hard, but there are definitely people and places that you can go to get some help.
And understand that help is possible, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is is when you go through life or go through your relationships, repeating these same habits over and over and over again. And I often describe it to young people as walking around with a piece of toilet paper on the back of your shoe. Like, no one wants to come out of the bathroom and walk down the school hall and not realizing that there's a piece of toilet paper hanging from the back of their shoe. But even though they might be a little embarrassed at first, they're really grateful that somebody said, hey, yo, you might want to take care of that. And so this is the same way, because we really don't want them to feel guilty or hopeless or start blaming themselves. Because for the most part, like we said earlier, they really don't understand what relationships are, and they're just figuring this stuff out. And so this is a way to empower them to make healthier choices, too, about how they treat other people.
And it's also important to note that some of these behaviors, in the short term, they work. They get what they want. If you use a guilt trip to get someone to, I don't know, do your homework, in the short term, it might work. But there are some massive long-term consequences that as teenagers, they may not necessarily see yet.
Okay. Okay. Well, you told me that 1 in 5 teens will experience some abusive behaviors within their relationship. So why is it important for those who aren't in an abusive relationship to have a discussion or to know about this topic?
I think you said it right there. 1 in 5 will experience this. So even if you are not the abuser and you're not the one being abused, it's still going to impact you. I mean, you've still got friends that are going to go through this, family members that might go through it. So it's still important for you to know what your role is and what you can do to help too.
And even when you talk about people in general and why it's important for people in general to know, part of what will help young people be in a place where they can come to someone and ask for help is knowing that they'll be received by someone who's not going to judge them, not going to dismiss how they feel, and not going to misplace their confidence in them or their confidentiality, their trust. They won't misplace their trust, because those are things that stand in the way of a young person being able to have those conversations that we're talking about. And so as adults, right, teachers and ministers and social workers and coaches, sometimes we have to set our ideas in the back about what a relationship is and just be there for that young person. Because, I mean, generationally, we kind of embrace some of those stereotypes or wrong ideas too. And it's until we know differently that we do differently.
Yeah. So how can someone, an adult or even another teenager, help someone who's in an abusive relationship? What can they do? What can they say?
I think the most important thing someone can do is just listen and believe them. Just that simple act of just listening. Again, like Nikita said, non-judgmentally. That's a really important point. Just listening non-judgmentally and providing that piece of understanding can be incredibly helpful. And knowing your area resources, knowing where they can go to, again, get the additional support if they need.
Well, that's what you can do if you think that your friend's in an abusive relationship, but what can you do if you think, my friend's the abuser? Or my child or my student?
It's hard for parents to recognize that their child may have some of those tendencies, but at the same time, if you really want to help your child as a parent, you will recognize and have a conversation with them about some of the tendencies that you see that are unhealthy. Again, in a way that's still kind of affirming and open, but yet corrective. With friends, it's helpful to, just be firm with what your beliefs are, and that you're okay saying, you know what, that wasn't cool, what you just did to that person. And in peer groups, that can be hard, but if we can do that with things like bullying and racial jokes and sexual jokes and just the whole assortment of things that young people are willing to stand up and say are inappropriate, then it's the same thing with dating relationships when you see that. So just really support your friends when they're in the relationship, but also support your friends when they're abuser by saying, what you did wasn't appropriate, what you did wasn't cool.
Yeah, imagine it's like what we hear about the bullying is that it's the peers who have
Bystanders.
the bystanders have the strongest influence. Okay. So what sort of resources are available for teenagers who want to reach out for help?
I think there's tons and tons of resources available. The first thing to do would be to visit Shelter House's website because we have a section that's just for teens. And that can lead you to additional websites and online chat rooms and just information, different informative little quizzes, things like that to just get yourself some more information.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Another new thing we're trying through Shelter House, as you know, is our teen advisory group. There's so much research that talks about the impact of peer groups and the influence of peers. And so I'm really excited that we're able to use young people to help educate and help teach their peers how to be empowered in relationships and what that looks like and what it feels like. And so really they're becoming part of our frontline people for reaching young people and making sure that they get good, healthy information.
Good. I know that at Shelter House, it's our hope that we're able to help prevent abusive relationships. We offer a group that's available to adolescents. I know that it's evidence-based and we're having really good outcomes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
One group in particular that we use is an evidence-based, research-based, as you said, 10-week curriculum that goes through much of what we've talked about today, but over an extended period. We know that repetition works. We know that consistency works. And so we deliver a new topic each week to the groups that we're working with, but each part connects together so that from beginning to end, young people see how it's not just one thing that makes a healthy relationship, but it's multiple things that help to create a healthy relationship. And the good thing about the curriculum that we use is that it is research-based. So we measure young people at the beginning to just kind of assess how much do they know. And we tell them, there is no right or wrong answer. We're not judging you. We just want to know what you know now. And then we'll come back and do the same thing at the end, because our expectation is that you're going to go through this, you're going to learn so much about yourself and about other people that you will be more knowledgeable at the end. And so that's something that we've been able to use consistently, and we've gotten great results from it.
And you're right in that this program that we use, it goes through so many different topics that are incredibly important. It goes through the basic, what is dating? Because one person's definition of dating is not the same as another's. And there's all these new terms that we would consider dating but they don't consider dating.
Right.
So there's all these different things about, I mean, you have to start with what is dating?
What is dating?
And then it goes through and we talk about abusive versus healthy relationships and communication, and even goes into sexual violence and gender stereotypes. I mean, there's so many different topics. It's incredibly informative.